Welcome back to Sports Served. I'm your host, Gwen Parks, and joining me today, Zeke Shapiro, Garrett Newman, Hayden Smith, and we're talking Big Ten football. I mean, loaded conference, great teams, bunch of schools. But let's start with the East. We saw Michigan in the playoffs last year, Ohio State dominating, a lot of teams with high expectations. So I want to know some top three predictions for this season, Hayden.
Yeah, Gwen, like you said, the Big Ten East is a loaded conference. They're 20-1 so far this year, only loss coming from Michigan State to Washington last week. Similarly to last year, my top three pans out around how it was with the exception of one team. Number one, I got the Ohio State Buckeyes. They are a dominant team, number 3 in the nation. My pick to win the college football national championship. And then coming up right after them is the Michigan Wolverines. They're one spot right behind Ohio State, and they have a top 2 defense in the nation so far. And rounding out my top three's got to be the Penn State Nittany Lions. They've struggled in recent years, but they're a hungry team, and they have a top 15 running back.
Yeah, and I know we talked about this a little earlier. Your top three differs a little bit. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I agree on the top two. I think Ohio State is a tier above, and then you've got Michigan, of course, number 2. But I'm going to switch it up in number 3. I think Michigan State is a bit better than Penn State, and Penn State usually drops some games that they shouldn't. So I think Michigan State bounces back and takes that 3 spot.
Yeah, and on the other side, we got Big Ten West. Iowa, Minnesota. What do you got for us, Zeke?
Well, the Big Ten West is like the irrelevant brother to their big friends from the East. Not too many teams of note. The only undefeated team in the division is Minnesota, and they're my number 1 team. Followed by that, I have Illinois. They suffered a pretty devastating defeat to Indiana in the last few minutes, but they've recovered very well and bounced back. And then at number 3, I have Wisconsin, another team that suffered a defeat but has bounced back very well. And don't even get me started on Northwestern.
Absolutely. And with Northwestern, we got to talk about some bottom projections. I mean, the team went 3-9 last year. And also, Indiana, if you were a fan, you were probably crying yourself to sleep during conference play last year. And also, we got to talk about Nebraska, man. Firing their head coach like 1 week into the season. Come on. What are some bottom predictions you got for us?
Yeah, I think there's a disaster in Lincoln right now. Nebraska is going into a full rebuild, and I think Indiana maybe comes back up into the middle of the pack in the Big Ten. I see Maryland and Rutgers possibly dropping down a little bit this season.
Yeah, and with that, I know you got a little bit of different opinion on that, or you do. We'll see. What do you got for us?
So IU is bound for a bounce-back year this year after going 0-9 their conference slate. They're 3 wins away from bowl eligibility. I like how their final 9 games pan out. I've got them winning their last 4.
Yeah, well, Zeke don't. What do you got for us?
Carry-on Connor is simply not going to work for the rest of the season. They have some very tough games coming up. As much as we'd like to think that the Hoosiers can do well after some exciting games, Idaho, Western Kentucky, those are not teams that play in the Big Ten, and those are not teams that we're going to be facing in the next several weeks, and it's going to be a long road for the Hoosiers.
Well, yeah, that's going to do it for us today, and catch us back here next week on Serve Sports.